On the 12th of March, 1987, a search and rescue team was dispatched to the remote slopes of the Black Hollow Range in northern Vermont. The call had come in 2 days earlier from a frantic father who claimed his 19-year-old daughter, Emily Harker, had vanished while hiking with friends near an abandoned settlement deep within the forest. At first, local police treated it as a routine case, another college student straying too far into the woods, another cautionary tale about the dangers of overestimating your survival skills. But as investigators pushed deeper into the wilderness, they stumbled across something that would redefine the very concept of a missing persons case. Emily's disappearance was not a simple case of someone getting lost. It was the gateway to one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in American history. The Black Hollow Range was notorious long before Emily vanished. Old maps show a small settlement established there in 1899 by a group of farming families who called it Ashford Hollow. They were poor homesteaders, lured by the promise of fertile land and isolation, away from the encroaching industrial sprawl of the East Coast. But by 1914, every last inhabitant was gone. The official explanation was that the soil was too rocky, winters too harsh, and isolation too unforgiving. Yet whispers in nearby towns painted a darker picture, claims of strange lights in the trees, animals slaughtered without explanation, and voices echoing at night from nowhere. When state surveyors visited the abandoned homesteads in the 1920s, they found homes fully intact, tables set with cutlery and food, but not a single trace of the families themselves. It was as if they had stepped outside for air and simply dissolved into the forest. For decades, the land was considered cursed. Hunters avoided it. Hikers dared each other to camp there. Stories circulated of people stumbling across old chimneys, still standing amid the trees, of wells that seemed to go too deep, and of children's toys left in the dirt, untouched by weather. And yet, despite its reputation, it remained open, a blank spot on the map that no one wanted to claim. That was where Emily and her friends decided to camp in the spring of 1987. According to the three friends who returned, the first night was uneventful. Though they admitted the silence of the woods was unnerving, no birdsong, no rustle of small animals, just a hollow stillness. On the second night, however, they awoke to find Emily standing barefoot outside her tent, staring into the tree line. When asked what she was doing, she reportedly said, "Don't you hear them? They're calling." By the time her friends reached her, she had wandered several yards into the darkness. They pulled her back, shaken, but she laughed it off, claiming she had been half asleep. The following morning, Emily was gone. Her shoes were still by her tent, her backpack untouched, her coat folded neatly on a log. The friends searched for hours, then panicked and hiked back to the nearest ranger station. By the time authorities were alerted and a full search mounted, nearly 36 hours had passed. What rescuers found was worse than anyone expected. Half a mile from the campsite, in the direction Emily had wandered that night, searchers stumbled upon the ruins of Ashford Hollow. The logs of old cabins had caved in, roofs collapsed under decades of snow, but the layout of the village was unmistakably a main lane, a scattering of chimneys, and a weather-beaten church steeple barely holding itself upright. But inside that church, they found something that sent many of them refusing to return to the site. In the center of the rotten wooden floor was a shallow pit filled with dolls handmade, their button eyes gouged out, their fabric bodies stiff with mildew, and pinned to the wall, written in a language no one immediately recognized, were symbols carved with a knife. They weren't graffiti from passing teenagers. They were old. Very old. The search continued for weeks. Bloodhounds were brought in, but failed to pick up Emily's scent beyond the church. Helicopters scanned the canopy. Divers even searched the old wells, finding nothing but rusted buckets and stagnant water. Her body was never recovered. Eventually, the case was declared unresolved, a tragic example of someone vanishing into unforgiving terrain. But those who were there knew it wasn't that simple. Among the rescue team was Lieutenant Daniel Mercer of the Vermont State Police. For years afterward, Mercer insisted that when he entered the church on that first day, he felt an overwhelming sense that someone or something was watching him. He described it as a pressure on his chest, a crawling along the back of his neck. He later confided to colleagues that when he closed his eyes, he could hear faint whispers in a language he didn't understand, emanating from the direction of the pit of dolls. His testimony was never made public, but in a recorded interview before his death in 2003, Mercer said, "Whatever took Emily, it wasn't the forest, it wasn't the cold. It was something that was already there, waiting." The story should have ended there, another missing persons file gathering dust. But it didn't. Over the following decade, 3 more disappearances occurred within a 10-mile radius of Ashford Hollow. In 1992, a hunter named Walter Green failed to return home. His rifle and backpack were later found leaning against the church door. In 1997, a pair of brothers cutting firewood vanished. Their chainsaw was discovered, still running, lodged into a half-felled tree. And in 2001, a photographer from Boston named Lydia Price went missing while documenting abandoned places. Her camera was found in the ruins of the church. The final photograph on the roll showed the inside of the building. the pit of dolls was gone. In its place was a crude wooden cross, and hanging from it, something that investigators swore looked like fresh skin. Each time, searches were launched, and each time, no bodies were recovered. Locals began calling the place the Hollow that eats. Hunters posted crude warning signs on tree schools, arrows pointing away. Parents told their children that if they ever got lost in the woods and heard someone calling their name, they must never answer. The federal government eventually intervened. In 2002, the Black Hollow Range was quietly declared restricted land, citing ecological preservation. But off the record, residents of nearby towns claimed men in unmarked trucks entered the forest at night. Some reported seeing bright lights over the tree line. Others swore they heard machinery running for hours, followed by silence. What they were doing in those woods has never been explained. It wasn't until 2009 that the mystery deepened further. A team of graduate students from a nearby university, curious about the folklore of Ashford Hollow, hiked past the posted signs and spent 3 nights camping among the ruins. Only one of them returned. His name was Joshua Bell, and by the time authorities found him staggering out of the forest barefoot and incoherent, he was covered in scratches and muttering the same phrase over and over. "They said I could stay if I left the others. They said I could stay if I left the others." The bodies of his classmates were never found. Bell was placed under psychiatric care and diagnosed with acute stress disorder, but in taped sessions with his doctors, he revealed chilling details. He claimed that on their second night in the village, they heard voices coming from the tree line, familiar voices, the voices of their parents and friends, calling them by name. His classmates wanted to investigate, but he refused, insisting it was a trick. By the third night, he said the voices came closer, circling their camp, mimicking their own speech back at them. And when one of the students shined a flashlight into the trees, he saw dozens of figures standing just beyond the light, figures, shaped like people, but wrong, their limbs too long, their faces blurred, as if half-formed. According to Bell, his friends followed those figures into the dark, one by one, until he was alone. That was when he heard the offer. "Leave them," the voices told him. "Stay, and you will never be alone again." Terrified, he agreed. When dawn came, he was alone among the ruins, the village silent. Doctors dismissed his account as hallucination, a trauma-born delusion. But Bell's skin told another story. Strange marks were etched into his arms and back, symbols identical to those carved into the church wall decades earlier. No tool could have made them cleanly. They looked seared, as if burned beneath the flesh. Yet there was no scarring, no infection. Bell spent the next 4 years institutionalized, until his sudden death in 2013. The official cause was a heart attack. But nurses on the ward claimed that hours before his death, he began screaming at the ceiling, shouting, "I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back." When they entered his room, they found him cowering in the corner, eyes fixed on the shadows, as though something was standing right over him. To this day, no one has been able to explain what happened to Emily Harker, or to the dozens of others who disappeared in Black Hollow. Some believe the land is cursed, a place where the barrier between life and death has worn thin. Others suggest it is the site of something older, something predating the settlement of Ashford Hollow, a presence the early farmers disturbed and paid for with their lives. Modern investigators who have reviewed the case files point out chilling consistencies: the neatness of the abandoned belongings, the lack of struggle, the absence of bodies. People vanish from their lives in Black Hollow, not violently, but cleanly, as if they were taken whole, erased from the world. In 2018, a private research group obtained permission to conduct a ground-penetrating radar survey of the area. What they found has never been made public in full, but leaked notes from one of the graduate assistants suggest that beneath the church, nearly 30 feet underground, is a series of hollow chambers carved directly into the bedrock. Chambers too symmetrical to be natural, aligned in a pattern resembling the symbols found on the church wall. When the team prepared to drill for a sample, the project was suddenly shut down. The land was resealed. The group was disbanded. Some locals claim to still hear voices on cold nights, drifting down from the ridges, calling out in familiar tones. Others swear they've seen figures watching from between the trees when they wander too close to the restricted line. And every few years, a hiker, a hunter, or a curious wanderer goes missing. Their belongings are sometimes found, neat and undisturbed, just as before, but their bodies never return. What truly happened in Ashford Hollow may never be known. Was it madness that consumed the villagers a century ago? Some mass delusion passed on like a virus, infecting anyone who stays too long among the ruins? Or is it something far older, something that waits patiently for those foolish enough to enter its domain? For the families of the missing, there are no answers, only the silence of the forest, the endless search, and the knowledge that their loved ones stepped into a place that does not give people back. And if you ever find yourself wandering the back roads of northern Vermont and you see a weathered sign nailed to a tree with 3 words carved into it, "Don't go in," remember the stories, remember the names, and remember that some places on this earth were never meant for us.